talking to me for a minute. I'm like, I don't mind.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is that Weems guy here with Y for another episode. And we kind of bled over to the intro just a little bit. We were invaded by a golden retriever who was being shushed away. And speaking of dogs that normally appear on the podcast episodes, Millie the Beagle is 2 weeks removed from, she's running around playing just fine. And then all of a sudden she can't walk. And so it's been a stressful 2 weeks here, but Millie took running steps today. So we're excited to see that she's getting better. So maybe she'll be back coming, just jumping in my lap in the middle of episodes here again before too long. Also on the mend, me. I am 30 days post removed from hand surgery, very minor procedure. For an office worker, it would be no problem at all. For a guy that shoots guns for a living, it's a problem. And I have not shot anything yet. I have free range of movement mostly in the hand. I still have a little bit of swelling, still have some soreness. The incision is still not completely healed over. Yesterday, I was going to go to the range and test it out a little bit, and I woke up and the hand was very stiff and sore. It was like that all day. And then last night, something in there popped and the stiffness went away, but the soreness and swelling is still there. So I was all excited about that. But then I went for an eye exam this past week, and cute little tech was there trying to take a picture of my eyes because this is an ophthalmologist, not just a regular eye doctor. Cute little tech's there trying to take a picture of my eyes, and they kept coming up blurry in the right eye. So finally, she picks up the phone and she calls somebody else because got this high technology computer system. She's like, "Could you pull up the pictures of Mr. Weems's eye? It's really, really, really blurry. Is this going to be good enough for the doctor?" And you hear the doctor say, "Yeah, that's fine. I know what's causing that. Send him on back." And I have a cataract in the center of the right lens so bad that the camera can't even take pictures through it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she's
That's
like,
no good.
yeah, we're sending you for a surgical consult because you were worse than 20/40 in that eye. And it's right in the center. She said, "Are you having problems driving at night?" Like, mm-hmm. And it's like she started naming off all these things. Like, yep, 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 yep. And so early August, I go for the surgical consult on that. I'm still planning to try to run the shotgun course. It is scheduled on September 21st, but I will know more after I see the surgeon on that as to what's going to happen. Hopefully, sometime this fall, we'll be back with classes. But with that, how are you doing, Brian?
Oh, not too bad. Busy, busy. I got a little hand issue myself. You saw the x-ray picture I put up on the face space. I've either like shaved a piece of bone or I got something right there in the old revolver shooter's web of the hand. So it's Hogue Tamers for me from now on. So
Wow, this getting old sucks.
it beats the alternatives, you know.
It does do
But
that, I guess.
but the yeah, just it's funny the years of abuse. Like I never really thought about like hands, elbows, things like that until like the last 4 or 5 years because all the shooting I did in my 20s, it's like I never really paid for it. So I'm paying
Yeah,
for it with interest now.
yeah, yeah. If I'd have known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself,
Yeah, but
as the saying
between that
goes.
and like just testing ammo for people and testing guns and being one half of American Fighting Revolver, and it's uh it's rapidly turning into a full-time job. When you called, I was doing some video editing and I was like, man, I need a break. So here we are.
There you go. All right, folks, we have a show that we're going to hopefully get into the topic of here momentarily. Uh, Listener, viewer, whichever one requested that we go over my history of carry guns and the like. So Brian's probably got some good stuff he can talk about with that too. So we'll go back and forth with our history on that. But before we do that, I'm going to touch on another little topic, and Brian will, of course, uh, have his input as well. The police chief for the school district in Uvalde, Texas, word came out that he was indicted this week. He and I think another officer have been indicted, and I don't know if that's the only two that are going to be indicted or what. But those two have been. And inevitably, when something like this starts hitting the news, you get all the people on Facebook, gun forums, and the like. Well, the Supreme Court has ruled X, the Supreme Court has ruled Y, and in several unrelated discussions of that topic, it came up this week as well, um, where people misapply what the courts have said. Now, I'm not a lawyer. BrYan's not a lawyer. We're not giving you legal advice. But I'm just going to tell you what plain language reading of the Supreme Court or the court cases say, because one of them that gets mentioned a lot is not a Supreme Court case. It's a DC Circuit Court of Appeals case. And I'm just going to jump right into this. People say that the courts have said, and usually they say the Supreme Court, that cops have no duty to protect the public. And so I'm going to, for those of you watching the video feed, you're about to see a screen share. For those of you that listen to this on the audio, just go to that Weems guy and in the search box, search for precedent, but not that precedent. I wrote this piece back when the deputy Peterson, I think was his name, in the Parkland shooting was charged for failing to act in that case. He was charged criminally, and the internet exploded just like it did this week, saying, "No, no, no, the courts have already said this, that, and the other." Folks, that's wrong. There are two cases that are often misquoted, misapplied, and they are Warren versus District of Columbia and Town of Castle Rock versus Gonzalez. Now, the first case we're going to talk about here is Warren versus District of Columbia. And if you go to the article, there's a full citation and there's even a link to the decision so you can read it for yourself and see if I know what I'm talking about. That's not a Supreme Court case. It is a DC Circuit of Appeals case, which means that ruling only applies to the DC Circuit. But in that case, some residents of the District of Columbia were burglarized and they sued the DC police, asserting that the DC police had a duty to protect them and keep them from being burgled. And there may have been some other stuff that went along with it, but it was basically started as a burglary case. And the court said, no, the police have no duty to protect you specifically, but there is a duty to protect the public at large unless there is a special relationship existing. And just an example of a special relationship is if I have you in custody in the back of my patrol car, I have a duty to protect you from the lynch mob that's trying to get you out of it. Okay, that would be a special duty. That's just an example. That's not exhaustive. But again, that was the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. That was not the Supreme Court. The other case, which is a Supreme Court case ruling, is Castle Rock. And in that case, the plaintiff had a protective order out against her husband. We call them, of course, they call them restraining orders in the case, but I use protective order because that's what we say in Georgia. The plaintiff had a protective order out against her husband. The husband ultimately takes the children in violation of the order. The husband does kill the children. She had called the police, and said, "Hey, he's violating this order. So bad things happen," and I'm shortening this a lot. She sued the police department and the city, claiming that the protective order gave her a property interest under the Constitution to enforcement of the order. So in other words, she's claiming she filed this under 42 USC 1983, which is a civil rights code section. And she claimed that she had a civil right to the order being executed by the police or enforced by the police. And what the Supreme Court said was, no, you don't have a property interest. In that case, a protective order does not give you that level of civil right. That's what the court ruled. I didn't say there's no duty to protect and the like. Those were civil cases. They do not apply to a criminal prosecution. Okay, one more
Do we
time.
know what they charged the chief with?
I don't know exactly everything up under the Texas law that he was charged because he's being prosecuted based under Texas state law.
Hmm.
So Castle Rock was a federal civil rights case. That does nothing, no bearing on a state criminal prosecution. She was suing them. That does not bar the state of Texas from prosecuting the police chief, just like it didn't bar the state of Florida from prosecuting the deputy, which, by the way, the deputy was acquitted of all criminal charges in the Parkland incident. So a jury actually looked at the criminal law in that case and said it didn't apply. In the great state of Oklahoma, there was a police lieutenant who was prosecuted under state law when he confronted a active shooter who was driving around the town, shooting up the town. And it's one of several officers that fired rounds, if I remember correctly on the fact pattern, fired rounds into this person's truck. She's killed. He's prosecuted for that. And the internet jumped all over the place with, um, that can't happen because of Graham versus Connor and everything. Graham versus Connor, and they brought up Tennessee versus Garner. Graham v. Connor and Tennessee v. Garner are civil cases. They both stem from federal civil rights lawsuits. They have nothing to do with a state level criminal prosecution. So, folks, the point of all this rambling on my part, and because it comes from my webpage that's called Ramblings and Pontifications, the point of all of this is stop it. Just stop it. Actually read the cases for them, yourself, and see what they actually say and to what they actually apply to. Please don't just repeat some mantra that you've heard. Okay, I just gave you the citations of the two cases that are so oftenly misquoted. There is another article on my webpage that goes into another precedent case based off of Blackwell, where it's talking about Tennessee v. Garner and Graham v. Connor and the like. So you can read both of those. You can read all the cases for yourself. Please don't take my word for it. Go read the actual cases and
Or
decide.
don't,
Yeah, or don't. You
because
can,
there's like 8 million case summaries out there that are easy to understand. So get the Cliff's Notes version, man. But yeah, it's funny that a lot of that civil rulings, people mistake how they impact procedural stuff going forward, right?
yeah,
Um, and they immediately associate that with, oh well, that's the Supreme Court ruled on this, that it has any bearing on a criminal case, and a lot of those ended up being case law for procedurals, uh, policies, procedures, et cetera, that trickled into law enforcement over time. But yeah, state law really has no bearing on it.
Well, it's like Tennessee versus Garner is a case from the 70s out of Memphis, which at the time, Tennessee had a state law that it was legal to shoot someone who was running from the scene of a felony. And so two officers responded to a burglary in progress. A 14-year-old boy runs out of a house carrying a pocketbook. They chase him through the backyard. He goes to jump over the backyard fence. The cop thinks to himself, I'll never catch him if he gets over that fence. So what was legal at the time in Tennessee, he drew his pistol, fired one round, struck the boy in the back of the head. He later died at the hospital. The boy's family sued. The Supreme Court, case gets all the way to Supreme Court, and SCOTUS says, okay, this is an unreasonable seizure. So from this point forward, this rule applies. And they laid down a rule. But it only pertained to civil cases, federal civil rights cases moving forward. Um, Now, the state of Georgia took that decision and made a law out of it. And that law would apply, but it's not a criminal law. It is actually a procedural law that would apply. In other words, say if we violate that law, there's no criminal charge of that. We'd be actually be charged under something else. But Graham versus Connor, which is the other big one in use of force law for cops, the Supreme Court never ruled on what the officers actually did in the case. What they did was they established a rule by which the officers' actions will be evaluated, and they sent it back to lower courts to determine. And then, you know, what the courts actually decided is irrelevant. The big thing that came out of that case was the rule. And that's that use of forces must be objectively reasonable under the Fourth Amendment. But again, that's a
And
civil
then
thing.
ob- objectively reasonable. Have you ever read about the standards of objectively reasonable?
Absolutely, I have. But go ahead.
Yeah. Where the barometer for that is the least objectively reasonable person. It's really fascinating. I did a podcast on that with Kyle Sweet from CCW Safe when he was their chief counsel. I think he still is, but anyway, he said the courts set that standard as if you had basically if you have a department of objectively reasonable people, the standard is would the least objectively reasonable police department that was trained to the same level, et cetera, with the least the bar was the least objectively reasonable of that. And I thought, man, that is a really, really low bar. That was my
Yeah,
take on it.
yeah.
And I don't remember the name of that episode. I'll have to go back and look. It's on Off Duty, On Duty. It's still active on iTunes and whatnot, but um, it was one based on some case law that had come out at the time. So
Yeah. You know, the Supreme Court in Graham was very, very plain. It said it's going to be based on, objectively reasonableness based on what a reasonable officer would do at the scene, understanding that situations are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving, and that we can't apply 2020 hindsight in the coolness of the judge's chambers. So you have to evaluate what the officer knew, the information the officer had at the time, in the officer's shoes at the time the moment that the decision is made. This whole play it back in slow motion 20 times later and all the stuff that we can do with all the technology now really doesn't have a bearing on the civil side as far as the objective reasonableness question goes.
right, if we're going by the least objectively reasonable.
Right.
So no, I had to find that language somewhere. If I can, I'll text you the link to that episode because it was really eye opening to me as well.
Yeah, we've got something going on with your video feed. It is
You still
not
there or
syncing.
audio?
Yeah, your camera feed is
Let me
not
try
matching up
this.
with you.
Hold on. Let me see something. Stop video. Yeah, it's really lagging.
Yeah, I've tried
Let's
switching
see.
back and forth from gallery view to speaker view and a couple of other things, but the audio seems to be coming through fine. And
Video.
it'll be okay. It'll be fine. More people listen than watch. So we'll cater to the people that listen, except for me sharing the screen earlier. All right. So let's get
This,
into the meat of the show today for the
see
several, for the few people that sat through all of our just non-lawyer ramblings on court stuff just a minute ago. BrYan, what was the first gun you ever shot? Not the first one you carried.
Ooh, a Ruger Mark IV, Mark II, little stainless 22.
Okay.
I was
Iverson.
the first one.
How old were you?
I think it was like 3.
Oh wow. Okay. I was 6 years old, and um, I shot my father's. It's labeled as a Sears Ted Williams 20 gauge. It is actually a high
Mhm.
standard Flat King. Um, uh, One of the only benefits to having an elder male sibling was that my father took him out to shoot, and I tagged along, and my father took pity on me. It was like, okay, you can shoot too. And so I fired that Sears Ted Williams 20 gauge was the first live round gun I'd ever shot. And I'd shot BB guns and stuff before that. And I have that shotgun now. Um, but that was the first gun I ever shot. And I toted that gun through the woods. And that and a Remington Scoremaster bolt action infantry rifle that my father got when he was 8 years old. I toted that thing through the woods more times than I care to remember, and have shot more pine cones, ant beds, just whatever I could get to shoot. Because Daddy would bring me home a box of usually either Winchester Wildcat or Remington Thunderbolts, because the feed store sold ammunition. And sometimes I could get him to, if he was going to buy horse feed, he would grab a box of 22 bullets and bring them home to me. And I'd go out and immediately waste all of them on plinking stuff, and then I would start the whole process again. Daddy, bring me home a box of bullets. Bring me home a box of bullets. So
Yeah. Mine was that Ruger, I think it's a Mark IV bull barrel stainless. And then the second gun I shot was I think a 6.5 inch 29-2, if I'm not mistaken. That one left me permanently scarred. But, and then after that, it was like Model 10, Colt Woodsman 22, a lot of 22s. Um, growing up, that was a lot of 22s. So,
I don't
man, I ended,
remember the. Go ahead.
I ended up with a Colt New Frontier 22 that I still have to this day. Um, it looks like a flat top single action army with micro sights on it. They were really neat. Um, that one, I've shot that one a ton. Uh, but yeah, I made a lot of 22s growing up.
Yeah, I don't recall the first handgun. Which one of them was I fired first? Um, it would have been either my father had a Harrington Richardson H&R 922 that he got the same time he got the bolt action. My grandfather got both of them for him, and he was when my father was 8. So either that was the first handgun that I shot, or my father had a Parker Hale Smith and Wesson Victory model conversion. That was one of those that was originally made in the 38 Smith and Wesson that was sold to the British. This one was actually a flight officer's revolver.
Hmm.
Victory model, sold for World War II. After the war was over, Parker Hale imported a bunch of them back to the U.S. and rechambered them in 38 Special. Um, and short. This one has the barrel was shortened and a different front sight was put on it. And my father bought that, and he had that in the house. And so either the H&R or that Victory model was the first handgun I ever shot.
Yeah, Daryl did a maintenance Monday on a bunch of those re-import victories that were some of them were rather questionable. So, and there's all he kind of took over my maintenance Monday deal one week. I've only been able to
Yeah.
do maintenance Monday about once a month. And he goes, "Oh, I got one." And he had 2 of those conversions. And I think one was a Parker Hale, but he was like, "Do not shoot these and don't buy into the pawn shop story that it's an OSS gun, because they're
Yeah.
not."
Yeah.
But in that era, though, apparently those conversion guns were cheap. I mean, really, really inexpensive. And
Yeah.
they were
There
kind of
was,
sold as like a defensive revolver of
yeah.
the 50s and 60s. But
My father was an insurance salesman at the time. and he had to take in cash payments for insurance policies. And so he went to a pawn shop in the neighboring town, and they had these. And I think he paid $55 for it, and this would have been late 50s, early 60s, somewhere in
Yeah.
there. Um, and it's still in the brown waxed cardboard box that it came in. And the double action trigger on it is horrendous. It is by God horrendous. I did not know Smith and Wesson made double action triggers that bad. Also, the shape of the hammer, you cannot see the front sight in double action mode until the hammer is at the rearward portion. So this is definitely a thumb cock at a single action and shoot it gun if you want to hit what you shoot at.
And that was pretty common on the Victory models and
Mm-hmm.
some of the M&P, the pre-war M&Ps especially. Um, and Daryl and I speculate that that's where the old myth of you can't see your sights in a gunfight originated. And there's even somewhat like the pre-war, like I've got a pre-war heavy duty in a 4 inch, and then I've got a post-war in a 5 inch. And the post-war transitional has a way different. It's got the short action.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the originals, one, they were a different action setup, and two, that hammer spur was right at the top edge of the hammer.
Yeah.
So depending, like that heavy duty, you can just barely see the sights above it. And then I've got a couple of 1905 hand ejectors, which became the Victory, that you can't see the sights on a 4 inch, but on a 5 inch you can. So it's the Victory guns, just like 1911 A1s, man, they were thrown together fast.
Yeah.
And, and there's no telling on those conversion guns how much they did to like, they probably showed up in bins of parts and they just
Yeah.
threw them together. So,
My understanding is the British cartridge that they were made for was a shorter than a 38 special round, but it had a slightly larger diameter. And that
it's a healed bullet.
these conversions that were coming back was they just bored the chambers out so they would take a 38 special casing, but the diameter of the barrel is slightly larger than 38 special. So they don't quite keyhole, they don't tumble going down the barrel, but they're not precision
Not
accurate.
grabbing much, huh?
Yeah.
The Yeah, that British bullet, if I'm not mistaken, was healed. So if you think like a 22, the
Mm-hmm.
diameter of the case and the diameter of the projectile are the same. And that, I
Yeah.
think it was 38. It may have, I don't remember the
Yeah.
exact thing, but it was a healed bullet, look at like a big 22 in center fire. And then they ream the chambers out on those, and some of them they're sketchy.
Yeah.
Um, but I can't tell you the number of times I'll see it. I'll see one on Gunbroker, Parker Hale converted for the OSS. And I'm like, no, no, it wasn't. Sorry. Uh, that was like a $50 gun in 1950.
Yeah.
And, and now like for a little historical piece or like a
Yeah.
bookend or something, there's nothing wrong with them. They require a lot of work to make them work right. So I've also seen them, also I've seen a couple of them in pawn shops for like $200. And
Yeah.
if you know what you're looking at, it's like, that's about right.
This one
Makes a
means
nice
something.
paperweight.
Yeah, this one means something to me because it was my father's gun.
Oh, absolutely.
If I walked into a gun shop and saw it sitting there, I go, huh, and I just keep moving along. Um, but yeah, this particular one, has some sentimental value to it. I got him. Um, it's not a Tyler T grip, but somebody recently started making
Oh,
another.
BK.
Yeah, BK. I got one of those and put on there for him and the like. And I'll take the gun out occasionally and would shoot it, but again, it ain't a target gun.
No.
This one actually is pretty respectable, but it's not something you're going to be going to shooting bullseye matches or anything with.
Yeah. There's even early Smith and Wessons, man.
Yeah,
plugged the chambers on a few of those, and I'm like,
yeah,
oh, no wonder it'll shoot a nice group for 3 rounds, and then 3 rounds are kind of in the same area.
yeah,
Um, you know, and then I've had others that that's one of the reasons I love the 10-8. The
yeah,
10-8s, man, it's like the chamber dimensions, the throats are consistent.
yeah,
I can only speculate that they retooled for that particular model, but
yeah,
they every one of them I've had just shoots the lights out. So
yeah. Um,
I I had an interesting this little aside. Went to an event and Justin Dial and I and Wayne and Daryl and my dad, we all bunked together at this
yeah,
big big house in New Mexico. And Justin was talking about actually marking the chambers on a couple of his guns because he wanted to shoot 100 with them at 25 yards.
yeah,
And like 3 of the chambers, he's so keyed in that he could tell which chambers were out of spec.
yeah,
Like, oh, I didn't call that one high right, and it flew a little
yeah.
weird. And then he'd back it around to that cylinder and do it again.
Yep.
And he's like, yeah, I got one. He said he had one Model 10 that he's going to shoot a perfect 100 with, but he's got to do it 2 rounds at a time with the 2 chambers that are in spec. So kind of neat.
Well, yeah, as we've been sitting here talking, and I've been thinking back through childhood memories and stories, um, I would have shot that 38 before I shot the 922 because I didn't. The 922 was at my grandmother's house, and I did not shoot it till I was in high school, which is a funny story about when I first shot it that I'll get to in a minute. Um, but my mother had an H&R 929, which is a
Mhm.
little snub nose H&R 22 that she carried. She worked in a bank, and she was one of the last ones leaving each day, and she would lock the door. And so my father was like, "You're going to have a gun." So he got this little H&R 922, and she was, carrying in her purse. And one day she opened up her pocketbook, and there was the revolver in there, and it was cocked. And she said, "No, that's it. I'm done with carrying this." And so I shot it before I shot the 922. So I would have shot either the 929 first or the Smith and Wesson revolver. In high school, and I did grow up next door to my grandmother. High school, I'm out feeding the horses, doing whatever, and a couple of my dogs are down by the creek and they are making a ruckus. And I'm standing there talking to my grandmother, and I'm like, "Grandma, I wonder what those dogs are after." And all of a sudden, this creature jumps out of the tree onto one of my dogs, and into the creek they go. And I went in and grabbed a pipe out of the barn. There was a little iron pipe sitting there, and I ran down to the creek, and the dogs are fighting a coon in the daytime, which that's not good. That's not
Nope.
good at all. She ran into the house, and I'm down there. I beat the coon to death with that pipe. And she brings me down that 922 and hands it to me. The coon's still twitching, and I think I put all 9 rounds of 22 into that coon. Is this still there to make sure that circle was dead? So I was in high school before I shot it. Um, the first handgun I ever bought is I had a job in middle school. I worked for a local dairy farmer, uh, doing some work, and I worked for a local surveyor, uh, cutting bushes on the survey crew, and they were, trying to do property lines. And I saved up my money, and I bought an FIE 2222 Magnum convertible. It was a poor copy of the Ruger Super Single Six.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought this, and I saved up the money, and my father went and bought it for me. And I shot it for years, and then finally something broke inside of it. And I don't have that gun anymore. I ended up giving it to a friend of mine who had bought a very nice single action revolver, but it wasn't hitting quite right to the sights, and he wanted to turn the barrel. And it's like, dude, before you start doing that, here's a gift to you for all the nice things you've done for me. Take this revolver, and if you screw the barrel up on this one when you turn it, it's not a problem. Um, Now I had already replaced that FIE. I actually saved up money and went and bought the real Ruger Super Single Six. And I say I bought it. I saved up the money. My grandmother went and bought it for me and brought it back to me. So the paperwork on that one's not to me. And the statute of limitations is long run out on that. But I still have that gun. So,
Yeah, I've I've got a lot of those sentimental guns, and
yeah.
some of them I look at and I go, man, I should probably sell that. And then no, I can't do that. Um, some of them, luckily, both my granddads were into guns, and then my dad's passed
Yeah.
several of those down to me, and those will never leave. But
Yeah.
well, maybe someday, I'm sure. But the it's interesting to me how like some of the perception that I've had from like going to NRA, and we'll have some people that subscribe to the site and they'll be like, man, you guys got all these great collector pieces. And I'm like, yeah, we got it's a good mix. I said, but
Yeah.
I've got a beat up New Frontier Colt that's just as cool to me as a pre-war heavy duty. And they're not, I mean, yeah, there's some value to them, but they're not like super collector pieces. And then I've got a Colt Woodsman that's just like a 30s model that is pretty ragged. Well, I say pretty ragged. It's got some honest wear. Really, really cool gun. It was my grandmother's, and
Yeah.
I'm like, those there's some collectability, but those are just as important to me as some of the eclectic collector revolver stuff that I've got. So and semi-autos, but like them all, man. And I see people get snobbish about boxes and papers and things like
Yeah.
that, and that's all good. However, if you adopt a dog at the pound, it doesn't come with registration papers and the pedigree. If it's cool, it's cool, and that's why Daryl and I adopted the phrase "we're out adopting pound puppies." It's just
Oh
and
man, we are stumbling into all sorts of stories with that one because you talk about the registration papers.
mhm.
Um, we had horses, and the probate judge and her husband gave me a pony, and the my elder male sibling was giving me grief because his horse was a registered quarter horse and had papers, and my pony did not. And so my mother and I got out a typewriter and we made up a set of registration papers and registered my pony with the Unique Horse Association. Yeah, so I made her up a set of. She's the only horse that was ever registered by the Unique Horse Association, and that would just tell him, "Shut up." Now, so where does that tie in? When I went to get my carry license, as they're called in Georgia, when I turned 21, they are issued by the probate judge. So I go to the probate judge's office. Now, this is the probate judge that had given me this pony when I was a little boy. Um, I filled out all the paperwork. Now, this was back in the day before live scan prints and everything. And I had to go out to the sheriff's office, which was in a different location. They had to call a deputy in from patrol who came in and took real ink fingerprints from me, which they put in an envelope and mailed off to somebody, to do the criminal background check. This whole process is supposed to take several weeks. Well, months go by, and I have not gotten my carry license and haven't received it. So one day after work, I go up to the judge's office. Hey, Judge Harrell, I've never gotten my carry license. And so she calls the sheriff and gets him on the phone. And she said, Lee Weems is in my office. He has not received his carry license. I want to know what the holdup is. And I can hear the judges and the sheriff's conversation. And I don't want to reveal too much about living family members in case anybody listens to this and wants to retribute for some reason. But I have a first cousin who has the same first and last name that I do. And we are 4 months apart in age. So people get us confused all the time. He was not criminally bad at all. He was very mischievously bad. at all when we were growing up. And the sheriff had just seen the paperwork. My first name, I go by my middle name, had my first name and last name, and thought it was my cousin and not me. And so he wouldn't have released the carry license. And it's funny, she tells him, and I told my uncle the story yesterday for the very first time. And so it's funny how this is all coming up. She says, "This is," and says my father's name, boy, not, and says my uncle's name, boy. He's on his way. Give him the license. And so I drive out to the sheriff's office, and Deputy meets me at the door and hands me my carry license, and off I go. 4 years later, when it's time to renew, and I walk in and I fill out the paperwork, and as I hand the paperwork, the clerk looks at it and says, "Which Weems boy are you? Which one's your daddy?" Tell him, "Yes, sir," and they hand it right to me. That was
That's
my
funny.
background check the second time. All that to say this: when I first started carrying, I was legally able to carry. Um, I carried my grandfather's on my father's side. He had a little 25 automatic. I do not know the manufacturer of the gun because the finish is so worn. You can't tell what it was. My grandfather was legally blind. He had several detached retinas. They tried to do surgeries on them to fix them. Couldn't, I don't know if that mess it made it worse or whatever. But he could see like outlines and shapes, but he couldn't make out people's faces and the like. And he carried this little 25 in his pocket, not for self-defense. It was for if he got out in the pasture working and could not see to find his way home, he would use it as a signal gun. They're making noise. Well, grandpa's lost. We got to go find him. And that's what he carried that gun for. And I had gotten it from my grandmother, and that's what I carried for a little while. And then it finally was like, okay, one, this is a 25 automatic. Number two, it's your grandfather's gun. If it gets stolen or whatever, you can't get it back. Now, when I say carried it, sometimes I carried it on my person. Back then, most of the time, it was just in my truck. So what?
Yeah, my my first carry gun, I bought my first handgun right while I was in the army. My first carry gun was a Springfield Lou Horton package, um, lightweight government. And did I lose you?
No, I just had to
Oh,
stop the
okay.
camera for a second.
It was a lightweight government model. So it was had a beaver tail, but it had like GI sights and flat mainspring housing. And I started shooting IDPA with it, and I carried that gun, and it was two tone because I've always had this thing for um, like the Packmeyer Combat Special with a blued top end and a either a hard chrome or some type of silver finished lower. And at the time, North Carolina was an open carry state, so in a vehicle or whatever. And then most of the places that I went off post were rural, so nobody cared. And I carried it in a Yaki slide, very Colonel Cooper, right? Like Yaki slide holster. And then later I ended up with an Uncle Mike's. They sold this like over the counter IDPA kit that was a dual mag pouch and a holster, a belt mounted holster. And I was trying to think. I think I carried Corbon Powerball or something at the time. It was, the latest and greatest, and Wilson 47 magazines and the whole, very period correct for the magazine ban era of fighting firearms. And then I ended up with a Beretta 92 and did the same thing. It was whatever I was shooting in IDPA, I would carry. And when I got on the PD, as soon as I could, I switched to a SIG 220 45 because we were issuing Glock 22s, 180 grain ammo. It was a bad combination. So I carried a single stack SIG 220. And then for a while, I carried a Smith & Wesson 450, third gen 457, because they had a fantastic double action.
Yeah.
And then they did away with the third gens, and I found a Smith 240 or a Sig 245, which later became the 220 compact. And so I had, what I was carrying at work and what I was carrying in a small of the back holster or an inside the waistband holster was like a miniature version, and various revolvers sprinkled in there, 637, 640, 642s, the 640 some or 340 PD I carried for a while. But yeah, I had a whole smattering of different stuff there for a while. At one time, I've told the story on Facebook, working an extra job in a jewelry boutique that was plain clothes and had on a 220 and I think I had my third gen Smith on, or maybe the 245. I don't remember, but basically thwarted a rock based on my footwear. That was kind of funny. But uh, but yeah, I mean, I nowadays it's pretty much either a revolver or a Glock. So I figured out when I got out of police work that logistically it was a lot easier to maintain a Glock than anything else. So, especially when you're doing your own armor support, it's way easier to just do the Gen 5 Glock thing. Still carry a Beretta from time to time, but kind of retired the Beretta. And it's not bad doing your own self support on nowadays. I mean, it's a lot easier than it used to be. And but revolvers, I carry like a 340 M&P, a 43C, and 22, and that's kind of, if it's one gun, it's a 38. If it's two guns, it's a 38 and a 22, and they weigh nothing. So, that's kind of been the evolution of mine, from like DASA to revolvers to back to DASA to striker fired to, and I mixed in a Glock 42 in there for a while, right when I was hobbling around right before I retired. So I think that gun punches way above its weight, and still got it. And uh, but yeah, since I've retired, man, I've kind of embraced that whole snub lifestyle where it's like I don't have to fix other people's problems. I don't need to walk around strapped to the gills, but there's times and situations that are that I'll up my carry game for certain things, but it's pretty rare these days. Um, yeah, and I still carry a G45 when I do carry a full, like a duty sized auto, it's a G45, and that tends to check a lot of blocks for simplicity and everything else. But yeah, I just like say Daryl and I talk about it. It's like, man, once you're out of police work, other people's problems are their problems, not yours. And if they don't make them your problems, you can kind of tailor your kit around that. And then, couple that with, if problems find you, what are they going to be? Categorize them, Is it going to be an assault? No, I'm probably going to walk away from that. Is it going to be some type of robbery assault? That's more the high likelihood. And yeah, snub checks a lot of blocks for that. I think some people in their head, they get this, I'm going to be in a dark parking lot and it's going to be 3 a.m. and there's going to be three people and I'm going to hear the spaghetti Western music. And it's like, no, I worked a lot of violent crimes and I never saw that. I mean, there were some instances where you might have multiple attackers, but generally it was one person engaging one person, and there might have been somebody in the background, either as a getaway driver or, that guy my bad guy friend needs some help. So a snub just checks so many of the blocks for that, especially an 8-shot 22. That's like, and nowadays, I mean, like you were talking about your grandmother carrying that H&R 9-shot gun. They had like round nose lead. That was about it. And, now we got good carry ammo for 22s and, a gun that weighs under 12 ounces you can put in your pocket that has 8 of them checks a whole lot of blocks for me. So,
Well,
Yeah, that's so I guess I went all full circle
yeah.
back to wheel guns again. So, uh, but I still carry and shoot autos. I love all of them. Um, I reconnected with my 357 lever gun in New Mexico. It's like, man, why why have I not shot this more? so
As
so
far as carry guns go, when I realized, hey, this is stupid to be carrying your grandfather's pistol around. When I say carrying, again, most of the time it was in the truck. All right, I know better now. I didn't then. Folks understand, I didn't go to the police academy until I was 27. So there were a lot of years in which I was legal to carry up to where I actually started actually knowing what I was doing. Um, I replaced the little 25 that was my grandpa's. I bought a Smith & Wesson 422 at a gun show. Now, Smith & Wesson's numbering and naming conventions don't ever make sense. The 422 was a little alloy framed 22 automatic. They had the 422 and the 622. This 422 was blued. The 622 was stainless, but these were 22 automatic pistols. They're
and
revolvers.
the 622s were 5-inch guns
You could get them in 4 or 6 at the
because
time.
I've got one of each. I've got a 422 and a 622.
Yeah.
To the I think it was a 4-inch and a 6-inch,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
They're great
Uh,
guns.
I,
Fantastic if you can find them. Although they're commanding a premium now.
yeah. I've got the 4 inch
You there?
in blue and had 10 round magazines. And I carried it, like I say, in the glove compartment of my truck for years. And when I went to the police academy, the agency that I was working for issued the Smith & Wesson 4006. And that is a boat anchor, an absolute boat anchor of a gun. So I carried it on duty. I wanted something smaller and lighter to carry off duty, and ended up buying a Glock 27 because like, okay, they issued me 40 at work. 40 is probably what ought to be carried. Again, didn't know nothing. Bought this gun from a family friend, and my initial police job was in a pretty populous area. And I'm like, well, there's going to be times nobody's going to know who I am when I'm off duty, that kind of stuff. I'm not going to worry about carrying all the time. And pretty quickly into my rookie season, so to speak, as a cop, I made an arrest of a guy for DUI, and comes up. The case very quickly goes to trial, and the guy ends up pleading guilty at trial because he showed up wearing a beer shirt to his DUI trial. And his lawyer was like, we do not want to go in front of the jury for a DUI with you wearing a beer shirt. And so they quickly negotiated a plea. I went out to dinner that night and look over at the next table, and there is the dude from trial that
Retro.
day. And I was like, I will never again walk out of my house without being armed. That was the moment the light switch flipped for me. And so
Mm-hmm.
I carried that Glock 27 for a while. Um, Eventually bought a Glock 19 and started carrying it more. And I used that Glock 19 to win several GSSF matches, and used one of the certificates on that for a Glock 26 that I carried some of the time. But most of the time I carried that Glock 19. And so I was carrying it off duty. I'd walk into work, I'd take my Glock off, put it in my locker, take out my duty belt, and put on my Smith 4006. And we stayed in the 4006s for the first 7 years I was on the job. We about year 2 or so, we swapped and got new 4006s. And then I did the transition for senior year 7. Wrote the proposal and did all the transition training for us to go to Glock 22s. And so that's what we switched in year 7. And so I would come in with my Glock 19 on, take it off, put it in my locker, put on my duty belt, had the Glock 22 in it. When I went to the sheriff's office, I could carry whatever I wanted. But it was funny, the first day, I actually started a day earlier because an ice storm hit. And all I had that identified myself as an employee of the sheriff's office was I'd already been given a badge and I had a radio. And so I showed up carrying my Glock 27 because the sheriff's office issued Glock 23s. And I knew I'd have mag and ammo, you know, interchangeability with the guys. And I had shot a qualifying score with it already that year. And so at least I'm in post compliance because I've qualified with this gun. And so I carried it. And uh, for my initial days at work, then I carried an issued 23 for a little while there. But for most of the time I was at the sheriff's office, I carried it personally on Glock 19. And so probably for the last 15 years or so, I predominantly carried a Glock 19 on and off duty. Occasionally there'd be something else. Like if I needed deep concealment, I'd carry a little Smith 642 or a Glock 43. Sometimes when I was traveling and I want a 10-round gun, so I didn't have to worry about crossing state lines, I'd carry a Glock 48. But my current issue gun is a Glock 45 with a factory milled acro. And that's what I carry. That's my agency gun now. Off duty, I am now carrying a Smith 365 macro, excuse me, a SIG 365 macro with a EPS carry on top of it. So that's the
Yeah.
whole rundown of my carry. And there's been other things, like sometimes I would carry a revolver on duty just because if I was in Class A uniform, I put on a nice revolver just because they're more classy.
Yeah. I was trying to think uniform carry. I had to carry a Glock 22 for like 4 or 5 months, right on my, or maybe 6 months of probation.
Mhm.
And then as soon as I could dump it, I went to a SIG 220. And then I went, I went to, SIG 226R in 40. And the reason I did that, it had a light rail and we were getting ready to approve weapon mounted lights. So stuck with that for a while. And then I stuck with that for like 12 years, 13 years. And then I went to the HK VP9 briefly.
Mhm.
And I liked the VP9. It was, I don't know. I didn't care for the recoil characteristics of it. And it could have been because I was used to shooting steel guns. I don't know. It just seemed really sharp. And so I ended up with a G45, just iron sights, put Trijicon HDXRs on it. And that gun, uh, well, that's the one I shot at the TACCON match this year. And I've had that gun like 4 or 5 years because it would have been when I left night shift in 20. No, it's been like 2018. I carried a 320 briefly for like a year or two in between the G45 and the VP9. That's right. And that gun, it had so many like little quirks about it. Like, oh, well, you got to change this one out. Oh, hey, there's a product upgrade. When you're an
Mhm.
armor, you get all the insight on
Yeah.
that. And I figured it up. The only parts that were original in that gun were the chassis, the slide, and then the actual physical trigger.
Yeah.
Everything else had been gutted and replaced at some point. And I finally was just like, it's time to move that one down the road. And the G45 has been a great,
Yeah.
I mean, I think they knocked it out of the park with that gun, A. And B, I mean, I've been through Range Master with it. I've shot it at all these matches, all these schools. I can't remember ever having a malfunction with that gun or a stoppage. I've had light primers, where bad ammo or something like that, but I've never physically stovepiped it or had any kind of like real stoppage of the gun. And I have shot the living crap out of that gun.
Yeah.
I've not done anything but put sights on it. And as a matter of fact, before I've cleaned it twice in the last 2 years. I cleaned it before Rangemaster, um, and then I cleaned it right before Daryl and I went and taught a class in Amarillo in April.
Yeah.
That's it. And I don't advocate for neglecting your guns, but it's just been one of those. It just keeps coming around. I'm like, oh crap, I should probably clean this thing. Um, yeah, I kept it cleaned when I was working, of course, but
Yeah.
the but still, it was like, man, I think the barrel's losing a little bit of accuracy, and I'd push about 100 grains of lead out of it, and it's back to going again, So it's
Yeah.
fun times.
I forgot one pistol that I did carry as my duty and carry gun. When I was working as chief, I carried the same. I carried whatever I wanted to, and
Mm-hmm.
I carried the same gun at work that I carried off duty as well. I did jump on the Glock 45 Gap for a while.
Oh wow.
I had a Glock 38 that was a freaking laser beam. The angels guided the bullets from that gun. When you shot it, it was the definition of a tack driver. I had the 38 and I had a 37 as well, but I was carrying the 38. At the time, the Georgia State Patrol was issuing the 45 Gap as the troopers were carrying the 37s, and they were buying their practice ammo from a manufacturer that was in the neighboring county to me. And so I just told the guy, so whenever they do an order, run several extra thousand rounds for me and let me know. And so that's how I was staying supplied in carry ammo. I mean, in practice ammo. We won't discuss how I got my carry ammo. It may have fallen off of a trooper truck. Um,
Right.
and so that's what I carried for the longest time. Well, not the longest time, for several years in the meantime. And when the troopers went away from the 37 and went to Glock 9 millimeters, I lost my ammo supply. And
Oh
so
no.
I regrettably, I went ahead and sold off both of my 38 gaps, I mean, Glock gaps, because I could not, I could buy ammo online or something somewhere,
Right.
but it wasn't just like run over to the, neighboring county and, with a purchase order and buy a couple of thousand rounds of, you know, gap practice ammo. And so I hated, I loved that gun. It shot really, really, really well. But times moved on. I've shot some other stuff in competition. Um, Now the Glock 19 that I carried for a long time was a Gen 3. Um, it's the gun I made master in GSSS with. The trigger, the whole trigger assembly, everything was in it, came in a Glock 17. And what I did was I swapped the same trigger assembly. I put it in a Glock 34 frame, shot a bunch of stuff, put it in the Glock in the 17 frame, shot a bunch of stuff, put it in the 19 frame, shot a bunch of stuff, and I got better scores with the 19 over the 17 and 34. And so that trigger assembly stayed in that Glock 19, and it's still in that Glock 19. I have since sold off the 34, the 17, and the 26 that were all GSSF prize guns. I either sold them or traded them, but I kept that original Glock 19 that I did all that with, and um, it's in a place of honor. It's been retired, and I ended up taking another GSSF certificate and getting a new Gen 3 Glock 19 that replaced it as far as what I was actually carrying every day. Um, and that gun I still carry that Gen 3 19. Was carrying it up right up until the end of this last year. I had, as you in the audience know, I'd done a lot of work with the optics on guns and stuff. And I bought one of the 45 acro packages personally. And that particular Lot 45 they got everything right that day at the factory. I
Yeah.
mean, that gun is just, it's perfect. As for, as a clock can be. Um, my issue 45 is not as good. It's just not.
Yeah,
Um,
and I've seen some tolerance stack in those that can affect them, but mine I was really early on the G45 bandwagon, and because I've always loved Colt Commanders,
Yeah.
and I kind of thought that that was like the original Colt Commander, lightweight
Mhm.
frame,
Yeah.
9 millimeter with a shorter barrel, and man, that mine is still to this day one of the most accurate handguns I own. Especially with 147 grain anything, it
Yeah.
just is a laser beam. And I've shot others that weren't quite as good, and mine doesn't have a great trigger. It's just
Yeah.
average, but that gun is just spectacular. So one I made the shoot off at TACCON this year
Yeah.
with, and I hadn't shot that gun in probably a month,
Yeah.
and loaded it with my pet 147 grain ammo and just went to work. So other than I had two that were louder, suspiciously louder than the other ones. And I figured out I had some gold dot loaded, like plus P gold dot loaded in it. And it was at like 10 yards, like a boom, boom, bam, bam, boom, boom. Somebody
I
goes, "What
remember
was
we were
that?"
on the line together. You were like, "Wow, that was louder."
Yeah, it was odd. Uh, but I really, uh, really enjoy that gun. And it's one of those ones I can walk away from it for months and
Yeah.
not shoot it. And then,
Yeah.
like a half a practice session, I'm back in sync with it.
Yeah.
The other is my Beretta 92, my Elite LTT. It's number 50.
Yeah.
And I retired that gun. I carried it a lot and starting to really show some age. But that gun, again, that's one of them. If I throw anything 124 grain in it, it's just laser beam accurate.
Yeah.
And doesn't take me a whole lot of time to get back in sync with those either, but I'm kind of past the point in life where I want to carry like a 30-ounce gun,
Yeah.
something, it's hefty. Um, but if somebody said you got to leave tomorrow, pick one pistol, I'd probably take it because I got a lot of parts for them, and I got
Yeah.
like 60 or 70 magazines for it. So
Yeah.
just load up a duffel bag of magazines, and I
Yeah.
I realized
Yeah.
somebody, Daryl came to my condo and I had all these Beretta mags in the window. I was counting them one day or something. There's tons of them. And I went and looked in my closet and realized that I could load every round of ammunition that I had in my closet in a magazine if I needed to. So it's like, well, we need to up our
Yeah.
ammo count a bit. Uh,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah, that's kind of been my forte. And the last I've gotten away from the SIG stuff, and not because I don't like the SIG DA stuff.
Yeah.
I just, it's kind of gotten to a point where it's almost unaffordable for me to
Yeah.
run a SIG. Especially the DASA guns have gone kind of out of sight, and the newer ones with the solid stainless slide, as opposed to the old folded spring steel slides, they're pretty hefty. And so I got away from those. I carried a 365 for a minute. I had a couple of different ones, and I never took to that gun.
Yeah.
I just, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a great platform for what it is. I just never took to it. And my par Daryl is all ate up with the 365. I think he gun barbies those more than any other gun he owns. And
Yeah.
for him, it's, I got a 10 round gun with an optic on it, and he uses them quite a bit. Um, Uniform carry these days, when I have to go on the rare occasion I work the state fair in uniform, I have what I call the Benteen rig, which is, if you're familiar with Extreme Prejudice, the movie,
Mhm.
you know, Nick Nolte is a Texas Ranger, and he's got the typical Ranger belt with an overbelt rig, and
Mhm.
I've got a Colt Commander I got up there in Indiana that I set that rig up, and it's floral, and it's all carved leather, and looks like an ST Myers holster, and from American Classic gun leather, and it's like it's $1,000 gun setting in $1,000 worth of leather, and it is purely for display. It's
Yeah.
like I can shoot the gun just fine, but um, but it's purely to kind of go with the whole southwestern image thing. It's cowboy boots and white shirts and cowboy hats, and I tend to wear a Stetson open road when I do that.
Yeah.
So
Now,
it's,
when I
a,
was in
it's an
Class
image
A,
thing.
sorry,
No, I was just saying
yeah,
it's me pretending for
yeah.
a shift, but
Uh, for Class A uniform, I had a nickeled uh, 22-4
oh wow.
and 45 ACP, and I bought some Aaron stained maple stocks and put on that. And um, back when Looper still was making actual cop gun leather,
Yeah,
they made we ordered a duty holster for the 22-4, and we sent a couple of loaded uh, moon clips to them in the mail. And they made us basket weave moon clip holders. That's when I say we, the sheriff and I did
yeah,
moon clip holders, and we got that, and we had a couple other pieces made for them from them as well. And so that's what I would wear whenever I had to do Class A. I'd have that nickel 22-4 on. Eventually, I sold that, and one of our deputies was carrying oh gosh, what was he carrying? He had a 44 special end frame, and so I gave him the duty holster for that gun because the sheriff's office had bought it. So yeah, here you go. You take this and carry it. So he was carrying that on duty for a little while with that holster. And then I think I gave him the moon clip holders because he got one of the 22-4s as well.
yeah.
Um, but
That's a neat gun.
yeah. Um, Now, if I were to put on that in the Class A, I just put on my Model 13 with that, and I've got speed load holders and everything for it, and I've got a cartridge loop that I can put on for a little more, you know, Class A carry if I want to do it that way. But I shot some other things through the years, shooting IDPA and GSSF. Well, IDPA. I shot this Glock 19 all the time in GSSF. Um, I shot a Smith and Wesson M&P 45 for a while in IDPA, so I could shoot in CDP, and I actually started shooting that gun at SSP for a while. And I have a Gen 2 Glock 17 that has from GlockTriggers.com what is now the Vogel trigger. It was not the Vogel at the time I got. I did some behind the scenes work for them.
Right.
And that's the gun that I shot an advanced Squirt Rogers with. It's the gun I took Top Gun with in my Rangemaster IDC and everything. So it is retired. It sits in a place of honor right next to that Gen 319.
Yeah.
And those are two special ones. Um, I occasionally take them out, and I remember when, and I put them back up. But I have an order in for one of the new 365 fuses,
Yeah.
and I'm going to go with the enclosed new SIG optic on top of it. Now I'm hoping that when I have this cataract surgery, that all of a sudden the iron sight will appear on the front of my pistol again, and I may go back to an iron sight again somewhat for carry. I still carry Glock 48 some, but my right eye's gotten so bad I'm having to shoot cross-eyed if I go with an iron sight, and so I want to give that 365 fuse a try. But like I say, on duty, it's the Glock 45. Off duty right now, it's a 365 macro.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what goes on with that fuse
Yeah.
model that they just released. I'm wondering if they're going to start pushing that into the duty size gun format. A lot of people thought that with the macro, and I was like, it's
Yeah.
still not quite beefy enough for me to consider it a duty gun.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm intrigued by that SIG enclosed emitter optic. I haven't heard anything bad with them yet.
Yeah.
Um, most of the others within about a week of their release, it's like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm still a dyed in the wool aim point guy. Like
Yeah.
that, I talked to our brother Dobbs the other day, and I'm like, "Yep, it's about time for my 2 instructor order to come through." And I'm thinking this year it's going to be a T2 and another acro.
Yeah.
Um, but but they're I just Well, I posted a picture on Facebook of Dobbs with a
Mhm.
1022 out there at the Whittington Center that had an original aim point optics
Mhm.
on top of it. And if you guys are familiar with Mike Wood, the Revolver guy, or
Mhm.
revolverguy.com, he brought that setup and had found a battery for it. And I think the battery life is measured in minutes, not hours, but and it's got a unique battery.
Yeah.
But I went up and cleaned a like a 75-yard like chickens or whatever that were on the
Mhm.
silhouette range,
Yeah.
and just one after another. And that optic worked marvelously. Now, I didn't have a great field of view or anything,
Right.
but at the same time, I'm sitting there with both eyes open, just shellacking these steel
Yeah.
targets. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a almost a 50-year-old optic. Matter of fact, Aimpoint turns 50 this year, I believe.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you argue with that? Like, buy once. And
Yeah.
then looking at, the T series stuff and the Acro series stuff, it's like, man, everybody else is playing for second place.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with it. With Hollison and some of those others, I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm okay with those as like normal Earth people optics. What does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? But in like the duty role, man, I have a really hard time getting away from
Yeah.
anything aim point for something
Yeah.
that's going to endure what, a lifetime in and out of a police car. It just
Yeah.
takes a toll on stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of these uh, dudes from the revolver era, we see all these grips and they've like rounded the square edge on it. I'm like,
Yeah.
it wasn't just because they did that. A lot of them got a hunk knocked out of them getting out of a police car. And, you
Yeah.
know, so there's,
Yeah.
pros and cons, all that. But I really, really like the aim point stuff. It
Yeah.
just flat works. And the SIG optic got my attention because it's kind of in similar in layout to like that. I want to say Zeiss, but it's not. It's
Yeah.
the one that Steiner. It's kind of shaped like the Steiner optic, and I like the footprint of that. But
Yeah.
anyway, let me know how it goes.
I will. I don't know when I'll get it. 'Cause, it's all just being rolled out. Um, Ideally, I would rather have a Glock 19 than the Glock 45. I just like the shorter grip. And I've always preferred the recoil impulse of the shorter slide 19. Now, I'll save whoever's about to send me an email or a text message or whatever. You could take the slide from a 45 and put it on the frame from a 19. I'm aware. I know that. I'm not going to do it. That just grates on me. That can't come from the factory the way I want it. Then whatever. Um, I've been carrying the macro. Mine is the Tac Ops edition. It does not have the velocity reducer because I'm not worried about the harsh recoil of the mighty 9 millimeter. I can handle it. With my hands and the problems I've been having with them, I do have a little bit of a problem with that small of a grip. I'm hoping that when I fully recover from the surgery, I'll be back to being able to clamp down on it and run it. Is I don't want to make a final value judgment on it until um, I've done that. I've been carrying the macro. It's just hard for me to go out and spend the money on a 19 when I can get a gun that's easier to conceal, and it's an 18 round gun versus a 16 round gun,
Yeah,
and easier to conceal. Um, but we'll see. I may eventually, that whole saying, outlaws and Mustangs always come home, and I typically always end up back in a Glock 19. Whenever
yeah,
I stray, I end up coming back to it at some point. Um, I shot still shoot CZP-10Cs for a lot when I was getting into the optic game. I could not find Glock MOSs. This was back during the whole, you know,
yeah,
everything was flying off the shelves and whatever. So I was able to get a couple of CZP-10Cs that I experimented with optics on for a while. And I shoot those guns better than my Glock 19, appreciably better. However, Um, I had went to a 4-day class and took both of them with me, and the recoil springs gave up on both guns. Now I had pushed the life of them, and I'd actually said, you know what, it's probably time for me to replace these springs, and I didn't do it, and it bit me in the class. Um, I've got a couple of different shadow systems guns, one of which I have a sentimental attachment to it because I did something pretty remarkable with it, but it's not reliable enough to carry. The other one that I shot in Gilhouse's class, it's the same as a Glock 45. That's direct mill, and it's direct mill for an acro. That gun, stone cold reliable. It's fantastic. Um,
Yeah, our buddy Burgess he played around in the Shadow Systems game there for a while, and he had two of them, and one of them was short chambered, and their customer service was awesome.
yeah,
I haven't dove off into that because I just I don't carry a full size service gun,
yeah,
and I've got plenty of them.
yeah.
I've got a G47. That's the other one. I've got a G47 that I picked up. And you talk about swapping slides.
Mhm.
One day I'm at the gun range and I had them both apart, and with like lubing them and doing what you do with a new Glock. You swab all the copper looking crap out of it and lube it. And I put them back together, and I get to the gun range and I'm like, man, this G47 has a terror. It feels like the trigger in my other one. What have they done? And I pick up my G45 and I'm like, this feels like a trigger that's not even broke in. And I looked down at the frames and realized I had put the 47 top end on the 45.
Yeah,
And I'm like, so I disassemble them and we're
yeah,
back to good. But oddly enough, my G45 top end didn't shoot as well on the G47 bottom end, and my
yeah,
G47 top end didn't shoot as well on the G45. So I do think there's something. I don't think they're as plug and play as people think they
right,
are. They're functionally plug and play.
yeah,
But both of those guns on their original frame shot exceptional.
yeah,
So, but yeah, it was just a funny little,
yeah.
and I mean, it wasn't like I did it on purpose.
Yeah.
It just,
Oh,
not paying attention for like a second.
like I said, that original Gen 3 G19 that I have, I say it's straight from the factory. I've done nothing to it, but actually the trigger assembly in it came out of a Glock 17. It's all factory. There's no like minus connectors. There's nothing like that. And it's all straight up, you know, as it would have come off the shelf. It's just that assembly was in a different gun. The G45 Acro combo that I personally own, straight out of the box. I put,
Yeah.
clean the stuff, clean the shipping grease off of it, put the lube in the right places, and I just run with it. Done nothing to it. And that gun is just occasionally one rolls out of the factory. They got everything just right on. My issued 45 Acro, I had to take the optic off of it, clean all the surfaces, remount the gun, do all that kind of stuff before I could get it to zero. Now, I was going through a lot of issues with my hands at the time, and that may have been impacting it somewhat. Um, but I gotta tell you, if I had to grab one of my pistols right now for a fight, and that was like I had to take a pistol, that my personally owned 45 Acro is probably what I would grab.
Yeah. Funny, I got one of these whiz bang 9mm that everybody's real high on right now that
Yeah,
have an exposed hammer. I won't
yeah,
mention them because
yeah,
I like the people.
yeah,
And mostly I like their product. And anyway,
yeah,
so I take them to the range, mount an Acro P2, zero it, and then I shoot my iron sight G45 with 147s, and it outshot the other gun. And I'm like, ooh,
mhm,
okay. So I grab said whiz bang 9 and I load it with 124s, and it shot equal with the Glock 45. And I'm shooting it off a pistol rest.
yeah,
Like it wasn't just me standing there banging away. I was
yeah,
actually put it in a rest and all that. And I had this thought. I was like, man, I could buy like 5 more of these G45s if I just sold this gun. And then I could
Yeah.
probably get one direct mounted and just take the acro off. But that gun, it was a phenomenal piece. I never carried it at work or
Mhm.
anything. Uh, they're for what they are, they're awesome. However, I was like, man, I just getting ready to retire. I don't see the
Yeah.
need in owning this gigantic hunk of metal
Yeah.
and going through all that stuff. Um, but what a great time to be in the gun
Yeah.
space when you can
Yeah.
go buy a Glock 45 off the shelf, buy quality ammunition off the shelf, and not have a massive performance difference across different brands.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember that from the gun shop days. Like the guys that were into Cadillacs were buying Berettas and Sigs, and everybody else was buying third gen Smiths and Rugers and
Mhm.
things like that because there was a noticeable performance difference between those guns. Uh, and then in certain areas where 1911s were prevalent, guys were having custom guns built, and there was a measurable performance increase. And now it's like when it comes to service size autos, I look at people and go, look, they all do the same thing anymore. They all do this. If they've been made in the last 4 or 5 years, they pretty much all do the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's it's great as an instructor because somebody shows up with a Walther PDP or a Springfield
Yeah.
Hellcat or whatever, they're all gonna probably make it through the class, right? They're
Yeah.
You're not gonna have to spot somebody gear anymore, like in the not so distant past. So
Yeah.
it's a net positive.
No, my first formal training, and I had a lot of rounds downrange with that Smith 4006. I still have an affinity for the DASA guys, right? As I would say, a TDA gun, traditional double action was what I was taught the correct term was. But when you say that, a lot of people look at you, go, huh? Um, I keep eyeing the Langdon Elite 92 Centurion. I just keep looking at that. But man, that's a lot of scratch to drop for a gun that I'm just going to play with. I can't
Yeah,
see I can't see myself carrying that on duty. Because I'm pretty much to the point now. Yeah, whatever they give me, I'll carry.
yeah,
And
and I got to tell you, the Centurion, as much as I like the compact, the Centurion, I did not like that gun
yeah,
as well. I'm not saying
yeah,
the Langdon gun in general. I'm just saying
yeah,
that configuration.
yeah,
And for a high volume gun, they tend to need like recoil spring replacement a little
okay,
more often in the top end kits. So
mhm,
they can be a little more finicky, I think.
yeah,
And I know lots of people that have them and love them, but they tend to, there's just like a shade more maintenance that
yeah,
gun requires versus the full size 92. And it's really not that much shorter.
okay,
So, and I'm not knocking that
yeah,
configuration. I think it's fine. It's just, um, a lot of people want to run those like a Glock 17, and it's like, no, they require like a hair more, you know, maintenance and attention than
yeah,
the full size 92. The full size 92s, they're like Ford F-150s. They just go and go and get, well, okay, Z71, Toyota Tacomas, whatever.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, but you can pretty well,
yeah,
I won't say neglect them, but they just don't require as much attention.
yeah,
Um, and I've had Centurions over the years, and I like the recoil impulse of the full size Beretta. It's just, I really prefer it. Um, but I, I, I kind of got off the Beretta, not the Beretta bandwagon, but
yeah,
um, I just kind of got away from them just because of what I was doing at the time. And riding a bike with like a
yeah,
hunk of steel on your hip is
yeah,
just not comfortable. And I hate to be a weight weenie about stuff, but at the
yeah,
same time, like, okay, I'm 42 years old at the time.
yeah,
I've been lugging a vest and all this crap for 20 plus years. Like,
yeah,
I need to give my lower back a break. And you know, then they came out with the Turtle Vest, and I hated
Yeah.
those. So
Yeah. Well, I've got no firsthand experience with the 92s other than like occasionally at the range, somebody's got one. Hey, you want to run a mag through it? And like I'll pick one up and I'll shoot a little bit. I've got no real experience with them. I'm going to probably be doing a trial with something coming up, provided somebody else is going to provide one for me to play around with.
yeah,
Um, but that'll give me some kind of, do I want to pull this trigger or not, so to speak. Um, well, like I say, I'll always wind up back with a Glock 19 because to me, yeah, I've got some collectible Smith and Wesson revolvers that are my
yeah,
appreciating guns. I've got guns that I have sentimental value, sentimental attachments to, but you know, other than that, they're all just tools to me.
yeah. And the 92, man, there's something iconic about it. And there are
Yeah,
three guns I know more mechanically about than any others, and that's the 1911, the Smith revolver, and the
yeah,
Beretta 92. And those three guns, that's like or those three operating systems, I can pretty well get into them and maintain on my own. Um, and
well,
I'll
but
next time we're in a class together, I'll bring my Elite LTT number 50 and let you bang away with it. And you'll be like, yeah, I think I need a full size 92 now. It's addictive. I mean, the
uh,
amount of people that they're like, oh, I can't shoot a double action gun. I hand them that, and they're like,
uh,
oh, hey, um,
yeah,
Daryl has the gun that I wish was a production gun, but I think it's long since outdated. Was the 92D compact.
yeah,
So short slide, short gun. It's like Glock 19
yeah,
size, and it's like a 16 round K frame
yeah,
revolver. It's
yeah,
just killer.
yeah,
Um, and that gun, it's hard to miss with because you're so focused on rolling the double action trigger
hmm,
that all that transition stuff and
yeah,
trying to shoot for split times, it goes out the window and you're totally focused on making the shot. So
yeah.
these guns are fabulous.
Yeah,
Uh,
the DA trigger pull does not scare me in the least. I actually like it. From all those years with the Smith 4006 and plus all the years with all the revolver stuff I've done. Um, so I'm actually, that's appealing to me. It's not a detriment. Um, I had always said that I was never going to drop the money on some big fancy custom gun or anything like that. And till I got to a point that my skills were such that the gun was holding me back. And I had a conversation with Ernest years ago, and he, trying to sell me on the hammer fire gun and everything back then. I'm to a point where I'm not nearly as fast as I used to be, but I don't care about that anymore. Um, but my consistency and my precision are better now than they've ever been. And so I kind of got this thing in the back of my mind. It's like, okay, you said you weren't going to do this until. I think you've hit the until. You need to give it a try one time. I understand the attraction of the staccatos and the like to the people that go after them. Other than an appreciation of what the 1911 once was, I just have no interest in the 1911/2011. I've tried a couple of 1911s over the years, just didn't work for me. I don't, and I don't care for all the maintenance and everything that goes along with running them. But I
yeah.
do. I'm kind of interested in. What kind of got me thinking about this again was I handled one of the 92 XS. I'm like, okay, this might be the ticket that gets me to try it, but I would probably end up just going with an Elite just because, 92G Elite and either a compact or Centurion configuration.
Yeah.
Uh,
They're awesome.
yeah,
Um, it's they're right there in my top three.
yeah,
And anyway, man, we've gone on a while.
yeah, we have. I was just fixing to say,
It's
wow,
about dinner time.
man, we've gone way longer than I thought we were normally going to go. Also, I did shoot a couple of Langdon worked over uh, H&K. What's the one with the LEM
USB.
trigger? Yeah.
Oh, the P2000, not the
No,
P2000, the P30.
P30 with the LEM trigger. And I could get behind that if it was direct milled and that was all I was going to shoot, because I would get confused with the mag release versus the paddle release, trying to go back and forth. So if I was just going to say, this is what you're going to shoot, I could handle that. But I'm not
Yeah.
willing to give up everything else to do that.
I
All right.
had a guy, I had a guy tell me, "Oh, the paddle release doesn't bother me at all." And what I found was most of the people that said that were either really good shooters that had adapted to it, or they didn't know any better,
Yeah.
and they weren't very good.
Well,
So,
you mentioned the SIG double action guns, or the traditional SIGs. After a while, I always stayed away from those because where the slide stop was,
mhm.
I kept, every time I tried to lock slide to the rear, I kept trying to push the decocker up into the to the notch. It's like, okay, this is fine standing on the range, but this wouldn't be good. And so I appreciated them for what they were, and I would always hand them back to their owner and the like. Um, but you don't have that problem with 365s and the like. Um, all right,
And I've
like I
never had
said,
that problem with the Beretta.
yeah, yeah,
Whoever at Beretta designed that lower,
yeah,
like they had an imprint of my hand or something,
yeah,
because that nothing fits me like that. We
yeah,
should wrap this up. It's dinner time.
yeah. All right, you get what else you got coming up? I know y'all got the
Let's
Snubby
see.
Roundup.
Snub Revolver Roundups August 2nd, 3rd. We got a Colt event coming. I haven't gotten the media release on it, but it'll be at
Yeah,
Range Ready in Louisiana. We're
okay,
teaching a 2-day Colt Python experience down there.
okay,
Um, we're we've got a class booked in Wyoming for next year that we're just working on the dates for, but it already sold out. So it's one of those, hey, I got 20 shooters and they're already paying. I'm like,
that's good.
yeah, okay.
That's good.
Um, let's see, we got holsters. We just
Yeah,
I'm waiting for the LCR holsters to get here. The sales link is live on the website.
cool.
Same pocket holster. And we will have grips soon.
Okay,
We're looking at J-frame grips here pretty soon, and they're different than the ones that just released from Hammer Forge, the Spiegel design grips, and those are authorized by Craig Spiegel. So if you're a Spiegel fan and you don't want to pay Spiegel money, or you have Spiegels and you don't want to ding up your Spiegel money wood stocks, they're a great alternative. And working on a couple of other projects with manufacturers that I'm NDA'd and sworn to
yeah.
secrecy on. So that are really um, revolver resurgent. And that's that. And then for the rest of the year, we got Snub Revolver Roundup, we got the Colt Experience, and then in November, the annual Gunsight Pilgrimage for Pat Rogers Memorial Revolver Roundup. And then December is vacation. Like
There
we're
you go.
off. And then we'll kick back off again with SHOT Show. We'll be at SHOT Show again this year or next year. I think that private class we're doing in Wyoming is like March, April. We'll do another we'll do a second East Coast Revolver Roundup next year, to be
Yeah,
determined on location and
yeah.
dates, but it will not be in South Carolina in August.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, it'll be some other time. But
Yeah,
speaking of, I just saw Magnificent Steve is coming.
yeah.
So
He sent me a message this morning that he had signed up. So
yeah, so there's him, and then there's several of the usual suspects will be
yeah,
there and endure the heat with us. But
yeah,
talked to Chuck Haggard the other day. He's all systems go with his hip,
yeah,
so it'll be a fun event. Got lots of guns in queue. I was video editing today. There's
yeah,
lots of cool stuff coming. It's on the historical revolver stuff and even
yeah.
some of the modern stuff. So still
Yep,
plugging away at that and getting ready to move. So I'm going to
yep.
be a little indisposed the second half of August,
There you go.
moving into a new house, and I'll have actually a backdrop, and it'll be better than my old office at the condo. So
Well,
fun times.
Cagle was invited to play along with this episode, but he's busy wedding planning. so he couldn't be on tonight.
The wee lad is taking the dive.
There you go. When you said the Spiegel grips from Hammer, it reminded me. I have been known to walk out in the world with a K-frame with a set of the old Uncle Mike rubber
Mm-hmm.
boot grips designed by Spiegel. I've been known to walk around carrying that concealed. But
Yeah, I got married in a 3-inch nickel 10-8 with some smooth maples. Yeah, some smooth maple spiegels because like in a simply rugged holster with the speed loader, it was pretty cool.
All right.
So I can't ever sell that gun now, ever. Sorry,
that's right.
guys.
That's right. Yeah. My rest of the year is going to be depending on recovery from this surgery and the next. And so I don't know. I've still got a class that's scheduled for September the 21st. That's still a go pending the surgery consult for the cataract surgery, which I'm told, the recovery is just a couple of days. But usually when they say that kind of stuff, they're talking about office workers, not like running around shooting stuff. So we'll see how that goes. And folks, we went way longer than I originally thought we were going to be able to talk about this topic, but that's me and wife. This is what we do.
We're gonna give Matt Landfair a run for his money.
Well, I have to pay Matt rent because he does own the internet.
You could just call him and say, "Hey, can we dub this one the Modcast?" So
there you go.
anyway,
There you go. Well, folks, thank you for choosing to spend your time with us.